What's going on, guys and gals, and welcome to Good Reel Hunting, where we hunt for the good reels so you don't have to. Welcome to Beers with the Bros. It's your boy Brad. Got the Brett man over here. Of course, we got Chris right here. You know him from Beers with the Bros episode. If you have not seen all those, posted
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
Yeah.
So you can
go along.
So you can check those out. Today we're going to have a fun conversation. We're going to compare the decade of the 70s horror movies to the decade of the 80s and those horror movies within the two. We're going to try to collectively come up with a decision basically about which decade was best. Obviously, you guys know 70s kind of set things in motion for horror and 80s blew the door open. So there's classics either way you spin it. It's going to be a good time. I had this idea last Monday night. Me and Bert were over there on Chris Snyder's channel on Creeping It Real. We did some this and that, and somebody asked us if we prefer the 70s or the 80s decade of horror. And I chose the 70s. Brett chose the 80s. So we wanted to kind of dig into that and just kind of see. We kind of wanted to go over the rosters for each decade and see which one we think's best as a group. So first off, how are you guys doing today?
Dude, I am doing so good. I'm still a nervous wreck. Got a big game, not this coming Sunday, but the next Sunday, just based off this recording. And other than that, I'm good, man. Like, just hang in there.
Yeah. For those that don't know, the game he's referring to is he's playing Scrabble with his cousin Jimmy, and the loser has to clean the toilet of the other one for the next year.
Yeah, but it's a really shitty situation.
It is. Chris, how are you today?
Right. I'm good, man. I'm glad to be here today. I miss you fellas. Been a little bit since I've been on here, but miss you guys. And in terms of the game, this is the one and only time that I will say this. Go Chiefs. But only for today and only for next week, for the next week and a half or however long it's going to be. Go Chiefs. And that's it.
Yes.
And you forgot one crucial part of that situation, or in that conversation too.
Which is what?
Anyways, sorry.
Fire Sean Payton.
Well, you can hire him too. But anyways, I think that our subscribers are not here to talk about sports. I think they're here to talk about what Brad has already brought up, that it would be comparing the 70s and the 80s. So I say without further ado, let's get started.
Let's do that. Okay, so let's kind of start things off by talking about some highlights, man. Like, okay, obviously the 80s was the decade where things really kind of started to unfold. You get a lot of things coming out at that point, a lot of sequels too. You get the birth of Friday the 13th. You get the birth of Nightmare on Elm Street. You get the sequels. Obviously, every year in the freaking 80s, you had a Friday the 13th coming out. And once Nightmare started in 84, they kind of pretty much did the same thing. So it was definitely the decade of Freddy and Michael. For sure. I'm sorry, Freddie and Jason. Michael was there a little bit, but I think he only had 2 movies in the 80s, actually. 1981.
Michael was there, my friend.
Barely, yes, but I'm saying it was mostly Jason and Freddie's show at that point. Michael had 1981 Halloween 2, and then 89 is when Halloween 4 came out, or 88, one of those. And Halloween 5 was there as well at the end. But either way, that's when the slasher genre was freaking full blast. You had some other stuff going on, but a lot of these things were set in motion back in the 70s. Obviously, we all know this. This is common knowledge. You know, the first Halloween came out in 78, Black Christmas in 74, Nightmare, Texas Chainsaw in 74, stuff like that. So just, all that thrown at you guys. We're just the surface level thus far. What are you guys feeling as far as the 70s and the 80s? As far as kind of how horror evolved from the beginning of the 1970s to the end of the 80s?
Man, I've been waiting for you to ask this particular question. I thought we were going to do it later on, but you know what? Right now, it's just as good
general,
as
just general. Just how things kind of transgressed. We'll get into the nitty gritty here pretty soon, but just in general, from how horror changed from 1970 to 1989.
Yeah, I can easily tell you that. The big thing I noticed with the 70s is just they have like a way darker tone.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had like dark stories, dark characters. like we got Billy from Black Christmas. He is an extremely dark character, very psychotic character. And then we had Texas Chainsaw with Leatherface. Him being a dark character too, with the way he kills and just tears apart the skin of his victims. And of course, we got the ultimate evil of all of Michael Myers from 1978's Halloween. So like that's like the big thing I noticed with 70 movies is they're just dark characters, dark tones, dark messages that this is indeed a screwed up world and let's just dive into it. And that's what the 70s did. But what the 80s did is they lightened up the mood and gave us what I feel like we really wanted, and that is just that classic TNA.
You know what, man? And that's what makes everything fun. That's kind of like, how I looked at it in high school. It's like, you know what? You could add some booze, add some titties, make it fun. And I feel like that's what horror directors did in the 80s.
Yeah, and badass kills too. You're like, just all that is just all the ingredients to successful fun. Not successful.
Like, you don't have to stab everybody to death. You could shoot them through the fucking eye with a harpoon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, and that's the thing. Like if you combine those three ingredients together, you're always going to have a fun horror movie. Are you going to have the best horror movie? No. But at the end of the day, you're in it for the horror genre to have fun and to get away. And the 80s brought that damn.
Man, there's a lot of fun in the 80s.
Wanted. Yeah.
That's a good point because you look at it like you see, like The Shining came out in 1980, like right at the tail end of the 70s, and that's like it's still dark at that point. It's still freaking.
Yeah, it was a blend because it was dark, but they added the titties in there. You know what I mean? It was like it's a blend. We're not quite to the fun part yet, but we've got a little nudity,
and we added some booze.
Yeah, and we predicated the entire story upon booze, added the titties, but we're not quite at the fun level yet. You know what I mean? So it's it's a great example of like the midpoint.
Yeah, and I know we talked about The Shining already. If you want to somewhere, we'll put a link up there to our Beers with the Bros episodes on The Shining. But yeah, I honestly, just to now think about it, I think The Shining was the very last 70s style movie because it technically came out in 1980. But just for me, like that and The Evil Dead are to me the last two movies of that 70s style. But I think like around 81 is where they transition into like the fun, like with gore, TNA, and all that fun stuff.
Well, it's like when Friday the 13th came out in 80 as well, and that's kind of was a transition period. And then, but like Evil Dead's a perfect example of this because the first one is serious and dark, and then the second one is a complete 180. That just kind of tells you exactly what things are doing there in the decade of the 80s. So yeah, that's a good example. And then you get Poltergeist in the 80s, right? That kind of got some humor elements too, as well, while still being pretty freaky at the same time. So that's another.
Yeah, that was a PG movie too, and that's what's impressive about that movie.
And that's kind of how I like girls to describe their first date with me. Creepy with some elements of horror, but still a good time.
That's how that would be a pretty good description, I think, probably at the end of the day, for sure. But yeah, I mean, you get some other stuff like that in there, like you got you get the introduction of Child's Play. I mean, you couldn't see that in this. Yeah, I mean, in the 70s, no, it wouldn't work, but it did in the 80s.
Here's your books, Andy.
Andy, you forgot your books. Oh, God. But that's a good point, Bert. That's actually that's pretty nice. So let's dig into some of these movies, man. You just want to start with the 70s and kind of work our ways up to the 80s?
Let's just if we could try to like just do kind of like a timeline, that would be cool. But let's just go from 70s onward.
So and then at the end of this, I'm going to ask you guys both what your favorite movie from each decade is, horror movie. So be thinking about that. But yeah. So the 70s, you have obviously freaking like I said, you start things off Rosemary's Baby for one. What was that? 70? That was was that in the 60s?
That movie 68?
Yeah, never mind.
Yeah, it's Rosemary's Baby, fucking terrifying. Gave way 68?
Yeah, 68.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if Rosemary's Baby was in the 70s, I would have had it written down because that's just such a popular movie with the horror community.
Yeah, I jumped the gun there a little bit, but yeah, that was kind of where things kind of started, at least in that dark tone of the 70s.
Yeah,
was Rosemary. I mean, you got Psycho in the 60s, and there's some things here and there, but Rosemary's Baby really, you can see some parallels between that and then some of the other shit we saw in the 70s.
Yeah, love that movie. By the way, have you guys watched that recently, like in the past couple of years?
I watched it 2 years ago, and yeah, I absolutely freaking loved it, man.
Wait, we talk about Rosemary?
Yeah, Rosemary.
Yeah, I actually watched it for the first time last year, but my big mistake on it was starting it at 1 o'clock in the morning. I was like, this could be an easy watch, and then 3:30 later, I'm just sitting there like I'm so tired, want to go to sleep, but I'm so interested in the story.
Yeah, it's a lot to
I need to give that movie a rewatch because I didn't give a very high score, but that's just because I started at a very bad time.
Yeah, it was a 5-star for me, man. I freaking loved every minute of it.
The atmosphere of it, so great. It was dark. I like it.
I thought it was gonna be slow, and I mean it was. I guess it's a slow burn, but I thought it was just gonna be kind of boring, But
God, the payoff, though. Honestly, though, I mean now you can kind of see it coming because everybody knows kind of what it is. But
the story's been done several times now.
Yeah, of course. But if you can imagine, like the impact that it had in the 60s.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like Satanic Panic and everything was still a very real thing. I can't imagine what must have been like then.
Well, okay. So we talked about that briefly. It is a 60s film, so it's not fair to really include it with the 70s, but it set some things up, right? We love it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Brad. It's like it did. Like that's a perfect example of a movie setting up the style and tone of the 70s. So that's a good transition.
Well, yes, exactly, and it led to The Exorcist in 1973, kind of a similar vibe and tone of Rosemary's Baby, slow burn. Maybe too slow at time for some, but either way, like it pays off in full through the end. So that was for the longest time, that was obviously regarded as the scariest movie of all time by general consensus.
Especially according to the theater experience too, with the casual audience, like with them passing out, throwing up, and all. Like no, dude, this is serious stuff. Like there's a YouTube video.
Oh yeah,
Be sure to put it down in the description. Remind me to do that. But dude, like it's crazy with how many people reacted the way they did when they saw The Exorcist in theaters. So yeah, is it the greatest horror movie of all time? Maybe, not personally for me, but damn, I respect the movie of what it did.
It stuck with me for a long time. I'll say that. Like even I watched it as a child, and I was terrified to watch it again until I was like, I don't know, maybe 19 or 20 or something. I was like, I'm not fucking with that. It's too scary.
Yeah,
and it really holds up. Like for the I mean, there's no CGI, and it's all like practical effects and stuff. So some of it's kind of comical now, but the atmosphere and everything is still super creepy. And the fucking voice that they did for that little girl, man, was
oh yeah,
bar none.
Yeah.
Yes, dude.
You said the same thing about Rosemary's Baby and what it would have done to the 60s audience. What about what The Exorcist would have done to the 70s audience? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's probably a handful of, even more. There's probably, several people walking the earth that's like, man, whatever, dude. I got to live my life this way because I saw The Exorcist when I was 14,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you got to look at these movies too. I'm glad you mentioned that a minute ago. You got to look at these movies too from a standpoint of, you got to look at them from the point of view of when they came out. When you're doing this,
exactly.
You can't compare from 2020 looking back. Oh, the 70s versus the 80s. You got to see what they did at the time for the people watching them, and that's something obviously we'll never experience firsthand, but we can at least kind of put ourselves in those shoes and be like, okay, at the time in 1973, we've never seen this before. This is not something. It's not like we've seen The Conjuring and Insidious and The Omen and things like that. We jump in, we see this for the very first time, and it just changes your world, man. Like it's just like it's crazy. Obviously, though, it's still one of the greatest classical horror movies of all time.
Yeah, I probably haven't watched it in the past 5 years. Have either of you watched it like in recent times?
Yeah, I actually watched it last October. Like that's usually a casual watch for me in October. It plays like all the damn time.
And does it hold up? It's still pretty creepy, right?
Like the creepy tone and atmosphere, like hold up. Excellent, but just the main problem that I have with the movie is just the first third takes damn forever to get started. But once it got started, it was like perfection. That's the only reason why I give it a 4.5 out of 5, because of that first third of the movie where they go like, where did they go, Brad? Like Egypt or some crap like that? Yeah, Iraq. Like we didn't need that. Like I understand like why they were trying to go with that, but I just felt like it wasn't needed, and you could easily trim down the movie and just get right to the point.
Yeah, and you got to realize too there, and that's a common complaint with the movie. But at the same time, this was the first time you really dug into this. People weren't used to that fast-paced style movie like The Conjuring at the time. They're used to stuff like the 70s was the freaking decade of atmosphere, man, and mood, as Dave would say, Dave McRae, mood, atmosphere. You see that here in The Exorcist, the mood that they throw at you in there, from the cold temperatures when the priest is out there running around the track, and you can see his breath and stuff, and you can just feel how cold it is out there. And obviously later in the movie when they're doing the exorcism and you can see their breath, that kind of atmosphere that they built, honestly, I think the best in the 70s at any point. You see it later in Halloween. It's got great atmosphere. You get it in, obviously, all those Jaws, freaking, all kinds of stuff in the 70s is just loaded with it.
Also a testament to how popular pea soup was during that time.
Yeah,
that's all that she was eating at the time, because that's all that she was just ralphing pea soup all over the room constantly.
Yeah, and I'm
actually value bargain brand.
Yeah, and another point about this movie too, and really The Exorcist, I feel like that and Texas Chainsaw really did this. They put their actors and actresses through hell, like with some of the effects they were trying to pull off, like the mother from The Exorcist, like when she got pulled backwards, like she was attached to a cord and they yanked her so hard where she's been she legit has back problems. And then Linda Blair. Yeah, she had problems in the movie too. Like she literally got legit scared because of the bed moving scene, but she was really in pain. And she wasn't crying like she was acting. She was crying like she was actually afraid and in pain. So and the Texas Chainsaw did too with the massive heat and all that too, and just putting their actors and actresses through complete hell. So that's what the 70s really those actors and actresses just put a lot into their work.
Yeah, and that
Shelley Duvall, anybody?
That's what I was about to say. It leads up to The Shining in 1980. That was something that used to happen a lot, man. They went through hell back in the day. There was a lot of shit in Poltergeist. Oh yeah. Anyway, we'll get into that. Yeah, I mean, obviously we can't talk about The Exorcist forever. We got a lot to tackle here. So just a few other little things in the 70s. Obviously, you have Jaws in 75, and obviously, we all know that's a freaking classic. Horror movie, not horror movie. I consider it a horror movie.
Yeah, and that's the movie that made me not want to step foot in the ocean ever again.
Yeah. Hell yeah, people are still scared of the ocean because of this motherfucker, dude. It's damn, it's terrifying, man.
It's still that way. I watch it at the end of every summer, and it always holds up, never lets me down. That's a great movie.
Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down.
Oh shoot!
No, but what Jaws Jaws created that fear of the ocean. If a freaking movie can do that to you, you deserve to be a classic horror film, in my opinion. And they better not remake that movie, because I heard there were some talks about remaking it.
You're not gonna beat it, man. Like that's still the best looking freaking shark movie I've ever seen in my life. Like they just don't do them like that anymore, man.
Yeah, I would feel bad for the director if it's going to get tasked to doing that job. So hey, good luck trying to beat out the original Jaws.
Who's going to take that job anyway? Like, yeah,
Spielberg would be the only one, dude. If he wanted to do something, if you want to actually put in the work to
who?
Spielberg, man. If he wanted to,
if he was interested in it, I might go watch it. But outside of him being like, oh well, we found this cool way to redo it, but it's going to be like somebody no one's ever heard of, like a Russian guy. And he's gonna be like, I felt like I could do a better job, and then they're like, oh man, the movie's going to suck. It's a fucking 2-star.
Yeah.
Here's the swimming with bow-legged women.
So that's another one. So those two, obviously, they stand out. They're timeless. You also got freaking 74 was a good year. You had Black Christmas from Bob Clark. The same guy that did the Christmas Story.
One of the most underappreciated horror movies out there.
Set the stage for slashers, honestly. Like everybody says, it's Halloween. Black Christmas was really kind of where things, that and Texas Chainsaw in the same year, which was obviously it's a little bit different than Halloween, but it's still, that's a true freaking genuine slasher, man. It's crazy. Both of those, they're different tones, sort of, but both of them are really gritty, man. Like Black Christmas, there's not a lot of humor in that. It's a really dark and gritty movie. Obviously, Texas Chainsaw is one of the most gruesome, most dirty, gritty movies of all time. Still,
yeah. I went back and rewatched that like maybe a year or two ago or something like that, and I never really realized, God damn it, how like the setting, the atmosphere, that whole thing right there is so fucked up, man. Like the dinner scene and all that is like
what Grandpa did.
Yeah, it's like this is so like wild for the time. We were talking about how things might have an impact, on the time that they're released and things like that. That one seems like that would be, because even you watch it now and it's like, it's such a fucked up, like who gave someone, like the idea to, was it Toby Hooper? It was like, what gave him the idea to present this family to a wide audience, and so yeah, it's more fucked up than I remember it being when I watched it as a kid, or as a teenager.
Especially when it's just based on a true story about that guy, wasn't it?
Ed Gein.
Yeah,
Ed Gein was Ed Gein never killed anybody though. He just dug up corpses and then made he would like he dug up women and like he would cut off their nipples and sew their nipples together, made a belt out of it. Now presumably it was only it's only for aesthetic reasons, because I can't imagine that a batch of human nipples sewed together would really hold your pants up or anything. So, but and he was just he did kill like maybe 2 people. I think he killed his brother and then Helen or someone.
But no, with I want to go back to Black Christmas real quick. For Black Christmas, again, we talk about like the tone, the atmosphere. Again, it's a dark tone atmosphere. Just, what I like about a lot of these movies from the 70s? A lot of these movies are like they could be so real that they could actually legit happen. Like the phone calls from Black Christmas, again, the shark from Jaws. And actually, I'm actually a believer of possessions and all that. So like The Exorcist actually could happen. I wouldn't say it would exactly happen like that, but I actually feel like they could happen onto some lines like that.
Halloween?
Yeah, Halloween, where a random guy just goes in and kills babysitters. That legit can happen. So that's what the 70s has really done a great job with. Just like how real they can make it, like a real scenario.
Yeah, and that's something that we don't really see much of that anymore, man. Like almost every horror movie that comes out these days has to throw in comedy pretty heavily, and they do that. Occasionally you get some that aren't, too funny, but even like The Conjuring, it's got comedic parts of it just to kind of break tension and stuff. But you don't see anything that's really so dark and gritty that you just can't fathom. You know what I mean? Like the stuff like that they used to make in the 70s, they just don't really do it too often. They occasionally get like a Hereditary or The Witch. Yeah.
That's what I thought. I remember that was the craziest thing about watching The Witch when I saw it the first time was just like, man, this is really, it doesn't let up at all, and it's really, it had that really atmospheric thing going on, where it's like, it feels like you're, you shouldn't be in that world, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the big dark, like, talk about like being real and all that. What about like one of the darkest movies from the 70s, in my opinion? That's the original Wes Craven's The Last House on the Left.
Oh yeah. And that one did
man.
actually, to be fair, that one did kind of throw in some wonkiness and some cheesiness to it, just because it had to break some tension. But
yeah, oh gosh, like when I first watched it, I'm like, I can imagine why the 70s people had a rough time watching this movie. And just the famous tagline, "This is only a movie. This is only a movie." Like I can understand it, but like for me, the remake's better. But I can easily see why the 70s had a hard time watching this movie for the audience.
Oh yeah.
So that came out what year?
I want to say 73.
73. Okay, that makes sense. 72. Okay. And
okay,
then
a
few years later, they had another one that was pretty much just like it. I Spit on Your Grave.
Yes, I had that written down too.
Was that in the 70s?
78. Mm-hmm. That's what I was just looking at here. Yeah, I was trying to make sure.
Have you guys seen that?
I have not seen the original. I've seen the remake.
I have not. Yeah, I have not seen them.
It was brutal.
The remake was?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I've
seen the original. Okay, so you, Bert hasn't seen them. You saw the remake. I saw the original. I actually don't think I've seen the remake. Does she jam a guy's face into the boat motor?
In the remake, I haven't seen it came out, but I do remember. I don't know. That sounds familiar, but I might be thinking about Friday the 13th, Part 6. Yeah, I honestly don't remember. I know she kills a guy with some crows and some other nasty shit, but
wait a minute, Part 6, is that Jason Lives?
Yeah,
that was a good one.
Oh, I love that one.
We'll get that. Yeah. We'll get to that here when we get into the 80s. But yeah, the Spit on Your Grave. I'm like, I kind of refused to watch that movie because I just knew immediately that movie would make me feel so uncomfortable. Because I really don't like scenes in movies. Like I really don't like. I don't mind if you like insinuate it, but not like to actually show it on screen. That bothers me.
Yeah, that's pretty.
It's a rape scene. It's meant to bother you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what the 70s like. That's why I respect the 70s. They did not shy away to make you feel uncomfortable.
Oh, that's another motto of the decade, my friend, dude. Just be.
Well, see, I think the rape scene in the remake of Last House on the Left is way worse than the rape scene of I Spit on Your Grave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree.
And nothing tops the American version of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That's probably the worst one. Well, outside of Irreversible, that's probably the second worst one. Yeah, it's a tough watch.
Oh, well, we'll talk about. Also, Wes Craven, Hills Have Eyes.
Yes,
one, which was 1977. That's another one where I actually kind of like the remake more as well, I think. But I also have only seen the original one time, and it's been a really long time since I've seen it. But it was, obviously that set the stage up for some things as well. Just kind of, inbred freaking. I mean, it's essentially the story of Wrong Turn. It's the story of, Texas Chainsaw kind of did this first, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it was good. It's classic. Another one, really gritty, really dark, really creepy, and the atmosphere was solid. Great setting in the Nevada or whatever. Good stuff, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And
actually, I've never seen the original.
No, it's got that bald dude from Devil's Rejects in there. The one that's like, he called me a chicken fucker, boss. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, he called me. He told me I fucked him chicken.
Oh my!
I know who you're talking about.
Oh man, but shoot. Speaking of like Devil's Rejects, or just like Dead and all that, but Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a classic like zombie movie. I felt like during then they just didn't knew exactly what they had in zombies yet, but they at least introduced the idea. And then that's when the 80s just blew that idea wide open. Again, we'll get to the 80s here in a bit, but yeah, Day of the Dead, another classic 70s movie as well.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
a good one. What about freaking Carrie, dude, from 1976?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Actually, if I can reach it.
Johnny T, man.
Yeah, dude. Before you freaking, before
You got it there. Yes.
Yeah,
got it on. Man,
got it on that Blu-ray. I'm slowly getting my physical media collection back.
I love Chloe Moretz. I think she's a great actress, but the remake was not that great.
No,
I didn't enjoy the remake.
They've tried to do more Carrie things. They did a couple sequels in the early 2000s.
The Rage, Carrie 2. Yeah.
And then
the first one's the one that holds up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that was a great Johnny T, dude, back in his prime. Actually, his prime was in the 90s, but we won't get into that here. He was out there freaking slinging it, man.
Yeah. The chicks were slinging it in the opening of that movie too.
Oh yeah, dude. They were
bush around, shit,
in the shower. Yeah, that was disturbing. Another disturbing sequence here in the 70s. That's what we're finding a lot of here, looking back at some of these.
Yeah, the damn mom. Yeah, the mom was disturbing too, with just like being an extreme religious person, like just doing all these crazy things to her own daughter just because of her beliefs. Like that's crazy to me. Like to me, that's scary.
But yeah, it's fucking horrifying. But that you're probably right. That may have been a little out of the box for that time period. You know, that probably was pretty scary for people then.
No doubt, and that's why Stephen King was the he was freaking on top of things back then. He was on top of everything. We started the sequel craze back then too. We had a couple different Omen movies. We had a couple. Jaws 2 came out in the 70s as well. This is just a side bit of information, but you had The Exorcist 2. The Exorcist, the third one come out in the 70s too. I don't know.
I think the third one actually came out in the 90s. Actually.
Oh yeah, it was a ways down the road. Yeah.
The only real last movie I can really tackle, actually, there's two more movies I want to tackle with the 70s, and that is the Amityville Horror and the classic to me, the first pure sci-fi classic of a horror movie of Aliens. Or no,
Alien.
Excuse me. Alien.
Yeah.
Yes.
Aliens
came out in the 80s.
It was it James Cameron? No, Ridley Scott did the first one, right?
Yeah.
Ridley Scott did Alien. James Cameron did Aliens.
David Fincher did the third one.
Fincher did Alien 3, yeah.
But that one, he sort of did it. Really, it was the production company that did it.
I was going to say, the studio did it, really.
Yeah. But yeah, man, the good points there, Brett. Both of those. Amityville, again, dark, gritty, freaking crazy ass story. Just getting darker and darker throughout the length of the runtime there.
Yeah, one of the first very terrifying haunted house movies too. That kind of set up the door for that to be opened in the 80s too.
Slow burn, dude. Freaking, you get flies on walls and just freaking nice and freaking. And the Omen we kind of talked about briefly. Kind of on top of that, which came out. It came out in 76, I think. 1976.
That's correct.
Just kind of following the footsteps of The Exorcist, and it kind of same time frame there. Slow burn, a lot of slow burns here. And then the original The Crazies is another one, by the way, from 1973. That of course, you guys know the remake with Timothy Olyphant there.
Man, I like it a lot.
Yeah, that was a small one. Obviously, we have like Piranha. You started to see things like this come out. Piranha. You have Tourist Trap.
Yeah, I've watched Tourist Trap a couple of months ago, and that just is a really weird movie. It's a PG movie, but that movie is just so weird. But that's what I liked about it, because it was just so unique. And it's just that main villain going, "You're so pretty," like just speaking that no, literally that's how he spoke, and it just
Tourist Trap. I've never even heard of this. I don't think.
Yeah, it's on Shudder, dude. Like it's a really pretty underrated 70s film for me.
Here's another one too, and they remade this one back in the 2000. I forgot what year, but it was somewhere in the 2000s. The Town That Dreaded Sundown is another one that kind of.
This was actually. Is it? There's a like a real life basis for that movie, right?
I'm pretty sure there is. Yeah, in Arkansas, some kind of Texas Ranger hunts for a hooded serial killer. terrorizing the residents of a small town set in 1946 Arkansas, based on a true story. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember who the serial killer was though.
I can't either. They got a sack on their head.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like where Friday the 13th took the idea of the Seki head, like look from that movie. Like that, at least that's what they claimed.
We'll kind of wrap up here in a second on the 70s because I know we got plenty to talk about in the 80s. I know there's plenty of things we can kind of talk about, and I know we're going to skip over a ton, but it's just for
guys. There's so many out there. Just the last one I can mention too is Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
That's one I was going to say. That was a very popular one. There's a handful here that I've been saving. We won't go into too much detail, but you have The Wicker Man. Which was set the stage up, guys, I guess, from 1973 for like the kind of fish out of water, being in the element outside of something. It's kind of like Midsommar. This is kind of where that is evolved from. So that's a good one. They remade that one with Nicolas Cage, our boy.
Like a pure classic, dude.
What about, and then we got Suspiria, the original from 72.
Yes.
Me and
we desperately need to go back. Actually, was it 77? That doesn't matter.
77. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't read.
Yeah, we need to go back and redo. We did the remake, the 2018 Suspiria. We need to go back and redo the original.
Yeah, it's just to do the original. Like, I'm down to watch the original. I've always had that on my watch list because just like I heard, it was just so like. You're just so drawn to the screen with all the colors and all that. So it's an easy movie to get invested in pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. I remember when we did the one for the Suspiria movie, 2018 movie, I was doing a little bit of research before we started the episode, and I just remember seeing a lot of stuff about the original one that really caught my eye and wanted me to check it out. So I think that would be a great plan to revisit that down the road. Another one along the, because I haven't seen that one, the original one, so I can't talk about it too much, but I definitely want to. So we'll definitely do an episode on that in the future. Another one kind of along those same lines from 1973, I'm sure this time, and this is one I haven't seen. Brett, I'm probably guessing you haven't seen it yet either. Chris, maybe. That movie's going to be Don't Look Now. I've heard that it's pretty freaky from 1973. Oh,
I've heard of it.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure you've heard of it, Brett. I just don't
heard the name. I've never seen it, so that obviously needs to be something we could watch right there.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good one. I think I had it on my list on one of the streaming services not long, but they took it off before. And I've just never been able to find it, but I've always been interested in it. I think it had a scene in there from back in the day. Bravo or one of those random ass channels used to do top 100 scariest moments on Halloween, and it had a couple scenes from this movie.
Oh, I need to watch that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. But yeah, ever since then, I was probably like 15, 10 maybe when I saw that. And I've been trying to find this damn movie since then, but I haven't been able to. But it's definitely a classic of the 70s that people talk about. So hopefully we can watch that down the road and talk about it. But yeah, Phantasm came out 1979. Obviously, that's a classic. I honestly haven't seen it. I know, but a lot of people love that movie and really the whole franchise. So that's one I need to see. But, obviously we'll cap things off here in the 70s with Halloween from 1978. Well, the Rocky Horror Picture Show was in the 70s as well.
Yeah, it was
75. I was going to bring that up. I was like, there's no way we can leave the 70s without throwing that out there because it's a little underground. I feel like it has more of like a, what you'd call a cult following or whatever. But
that's a good word for it.
But it's pretty well known. I mean, it's not like it's something people haven't heard of.
Oh, it's on the scratch off list of 100 movies, the bucket list. I mean, it's definitely one that people love. Yeah.
Plus Susan Sarandon,
Tim Curry,
nude in there, so it's hard to beat that. I mean, for the time,
for sure.
Yeah. Meatloaf, when you get Meatloaf in a musical, you know what I mean? So.
Meatloaf.
What an idiot! But yeah, it's actually really good. You guys have seen it, yes?
I have not. Yeah, we have not scratched off yet. Yeah.
Oh man, you gotta see it. I mean, it's as crazy and over the top as you would imagine it to be. you may have to watch it 2 or 3 times to kind of get into it, but it's you have to appreciate it because it is so crazy and over the top.
I do have it, and it's one that we've been trying to see since we just haven't watched it yet, but it's been one that's been on our list since we got this thing. But we haven't watched it yet, but it's definitely coming. But I did at least want to bring it up as one from the 70s. But yeah, and then obviously you got Halloween.
The great one, considered one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and rightfully so. And
it set up what that did is, it essentially set up this freaking 80s, man, altogether, man. With that, you get Friday the 13th derived from that. Obviously, everybody knows this, but Friday the 13th was literally a ripoff of Halloween. The director himself said that. He wanted to rip off Halloween and make money off of it, essentially. But
it's just like Friday the 13th went into the direction that Halloween did set up, but they just like intensified it. Like Halloween is more of like a psychological like experience to watch, but like freaking Friday the 13th is more the gore experience.
Yeah, precisely. But yeah, that really, that set things up for the 80s, and then that freaking boom. And we're not going to go into Halloween. We're definitely going to do, Halloween was something we talk about all the time. So, we'll get into that more down the road, obviously. But, yeah, man, obviously that's a very important movie and leads us into the 80s, which obviously The Shining, 1980.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, dude. So let's get into the 80s, man. Let's talk about some of these highlights, and then we'll just kind of talk about obviously, we talked about how things kind of evolved from the 70s to the 80s, how things changed a little bit. What you just said, Brett, is a perfect example. Again, not only did things get a little lighter and more campy and more humorous in the 80s, it also got more gory, more bloody, more special effects. Yeah.
And can we just start off with the practical effects? I'm glad you brought up that word, because let's talk about my all-time favorite practical effects horror movie, and that's John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Like when I watched it for the first time, I'm like, oh, come on, man. There's no way that all this is practical effects. And like, no, a lot of pretty much to all of it is practical effects. I'm like,
okay, so
I want to throw one in 1980.
All right.
Right on the cusp. But I don't think you guys have ever seen before. Cannibal Holocaust.
Oh God. Well, how did I not know some asshole was going to bring this up?
you never watched it, did you?
No, I've heard all about it. I'm just not interested.
Yeah. Why not, man?
Well, first off,
it's a movie. It's all fake. They kill the turtle in it, but it's fine.
I haven't seen it.
It's not fine. Obviously, he went to court over it and all that, but it's
that movie should have been saved for the 70s.
It's
should have been used.
There are a couple of funny moments in there, but I digress. It's worth a watch, man. You need to watch it. Like it will blow your mind. It's like how out there it is. I don't think
you're gonna have to get a couple of these in me in order to watch that.
People think that it's like the craziest thing or whatever, but I don't think it's that much worse than than some other things. I Spit on Your Grave or things like that. It's really not that bad.
Kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, it's just a little.
It's on Shudder, so
I ain't watching that.
Oh man,
it's just strange. It's out there. I'll throw that in there because it's another one that's has a cult following, kind of.
Maybe I'll pound some whiskey and give it a shot one time.
But I dare you, brother.
But yeah, man, we had that. Okay, so yeah, the 80s. Okay, so started out obviously The Shining, The Thing, like you said. You get Friday the 13th in 1980, which again, ripping off Halloween, but adding more gore, adding more effects, adding more
TNA.
TNA. Stuff like that.
It dominated the 80s too with all the Friday movies we did get.
Absolutely. Every freaking year they had one of those come out, man.
Yeah, I was thinking there's like the first, like someone finally caught on to like you could blend horror with like having fun. You know, you can have fun going to see a horror movie. You know, I think when someone finally caught on to that, it was like, you know, light bulb moment.
No, most definitely, dude.
Yeah, and can we like at least give appreciation to the man, the myth, the legend of the '80s that really like brought out all the practical effects and all that? And that's one, Mr. Tom Savini.
Oh
yeah,
yeah. He was definitely.
Who did you think I was going to say?
Freddie Mercury.
Yeah. Easily Tom Savini. He is just like the master of his craft, and the '80s was his like little playground. Of
he had a good time between Friday the 13th and The Burning, and
man, I was going to say that as the next movie topic is The Burning.
Talk about it, my friend. Let's hear you talk about The Burning. I know you like it. It's got George Costanza in there.
Yeah, dude. The first time I watched The Burning was just because of Tom Savini alone and the practical effects he did in that movie. But not only just what he did in that movie, but just the story and just the tone of that movie. To me, honestly, I think is better than Friday the 13th.
Yeah, I mean, I could honestly like
I have more fun with Friday the 13th, but if I'm going to say which one's the better movie, it's obviously The Burning.
I don't know. I mean, it's just so. I mean, I like it. Between that, though, like it's better than a lot of the Friday the 13th movies. That's for sure.
Agreed.
But I mean, like if I had to compare it to, Jason Lives, like I'm picking Jason Lives all day. Friday the 13th 4. I'm picking that. Probably even the original Friday I would pick over this. But
what about Jason X?
Oh, it's better than that. Yeah.
What about Jason Goes to Hell?
Definitely better than that.
Sorry, Dan.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's good. It's fine. The Burning. I really enjoyed it. It was fun. George Alexander was my favorite part of it, though.
Chris, have you seen The Burning?
I have not.
Oh, you need to watch it. It's a very good.
Quite frankly, I don't know that I've ever even heard of it. Really, The Burning, and it's from the '80s.
From the '80s, man. I believe 1981.
No, I know I've never seen it.
I'm sure you heard of this one, and let's just go ahead and just go with the camp field because that's what the '80s did tackle a lot of. Is the '80s kind of like the camp movies, like movies taking place at the camp. So obviously, it told you don't go fucking camping, and that's Sleepaway Camp.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, and speaking of camp, that's more campiness, man. That's a cheesy, freaking start to finish freaking cheese fest, man. But it is super fun, and obviously that ending is one of the most iconic things from the '80s.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's like one of the most iconic horror endings of all time.
Yeah, and you get the weird freaking pedophile cook in the kitchen, and yeah, I mean it's a freaking cheesy movie, man, but it is so much fun. And again, that's a perfect example of the '80s.
Yeah, and there's so many of the crazy like cheesy '80 movies. Another one I can name on the top of my head is Chopping Mall with Barbara Crampton. That is a very it's the best movie in the world, no, but it's just like if you want to put on a movie for an hour and a half and just have a good time, Chopping Mall does that.
Most definitely.
I have to be completely honest. I haven't never seen nor heard of either of these movies.
What?
Oh yeah.
Never heard of Sleepaway Camp. No.
Oh, dude, you gotta watch Sleepaway Camp immediately.
Is it on Shudder?
I think so.
It's not actually. I actually believe it's on Amazon. Sleepaway Camp. No, Chopping Mall is on Shudder. If it's Sleepaway Camp, I'm pretty sure it's still on Amazon Prime.
Did they take it off of Shudder?
I didn't think they had it at Shudder at all.
That's where I watched it the first time. But either way,
maybe I'm wrong.
But anyway, yeah, it's good. If you like the kind of the campy stuff, and just cheesy '80s slashers, then yeah, it's definitely check it out. It's a fun time. What about the okay, so Evil Dead came out 1981, the first one, and just more that
not too far from here.
No, Morristown, Tennessee.
You got it.
I'm like an hour away from that, from the famous cabin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that's a good. Thank you for pointing that out to me. this was the first movie, like The Evil Dead. This was the first horror movie that tackled the cabin, feel like, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, The Evil Dead, absolutely loved that movie, adored that movie, just of what they had to deal with at the time. Like, yeah, and that's like wasn't that our introduction to Sam Raimi?
Yeah.
He might have done one thing before that, but that's what the big
that's
thing
like
was.
that's the one that put him on the map, and like he kind of like say like the first Evil Dead movie wasn't his like full vision. Trust me, we got that later on with Evil Dead 2. But damn, I just love the Evil Dead and just how dark and serious it is. Like, again, I consider it more of a 70s feel, but again, that's just that transition.
What about the Army of Darkness, though?
Dude, that's 90s, but
that's 90s.
Yeah, I know. When it went on, we were talking about that franchise. People hated it, and I thought it was kind of fun. The Army of Darkness.
Yeah,
I got I got it's my worst of the Evil Dead franchise, but trust me, it is not bad. It is a fucking hilarious movie.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. He started his career trying to kill Bruce Campbell, and then sort of ended it while successfully killing Spider-Man.
Oh man, you're Jack and shit left down. I mean, Jack.
Yeah.
Oh guys, yeah, we can go all day on it, but yeah, the Evil Dead like really helped bring like a big spotlight to the 80s.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, it follows everything to a T. You got the effects in there, which obviously
with the claymation.
Yeah, I mean that's 80s. You got and just the way that franchise evolves is a perfect way of how kind of horror in general evolved by and large. Okay, so you also have we talked briefly Poltergeist from 1982, Tobe Hooper again, really Steven Spielberg maybe. We'll figure it out one of these days maybe, but either way, classic movie, bringing in a little bit of humor to the like Chris's dates, a little bit of humor into the creepy and the scary.
That's how I like them to go, dude. just ask the ladies. That's how they like it to go. You know what? As a side note, something else that I'm seeing here in the 80s that I don't think I'd ever really paid attention to. This is like the heyday of Stephen King. Adaptations of his novels really blew up in the 80s. Like we're talking about like Cujo, Firestarter, fucking Christine. Yeah, Pet Sematary. Yeah, so many of these. Really, I feel like this is really his heyday. His novels are really, a lot of people were adapting his novels during this time.
The Corn.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I think Cat's Eye was him, Maximum Overdrive, which he actually directed, by the way, which is honestly not a good movie, but hella fun.
He said,
but see, that's the 80s for you. Like they're not great movies. They're just like you can have fun with it. Yeah.
He said doing Maximum Overdrive, dude. He was so high on cocaine the whole production, he had no idea what the fuck he was doing. He doesn't remember doing it.
Really? Yeah, fucking Emilio Estevez versus a semi with a giant green thing on the front of it is like. You try to pitch that to a studio today, like, okay, I had this great idea. All right, cool, we'll finance it. What is it? Emilio Estevez is trapped at a diner, and he runs out periodically in a truck that's controlled by an alien force, kind of chases him around the parking lot. Get the fuck out. It's like, get out of this fucking office. You're not working in Hollywood ever again.
Yeah, that went well.
Yeah, but see,
you know what? Fuck Warner Brothers. We're going to Paramount. They'll accept it,
Yeah, but dude, like that's actually a really damn good point. You could get away with a lot of these like ridiculous storylines in the 80s. You could not do it now because no chance in hell they would make it. It's like the perfect excuse to have these movies be made. So that's actually a really good point.
Yeah, dude. I mean, for sure. That there's several movies kind of like that. Just so ridiculous it works because it's the 80s, man. And another sorry, I just thought of this, but another kind of example about what you're saying earlier about going from gritty to goofy. Obviously we saw that with Evil Dead.
Killer Clowns?
What?
Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Outer Space?
No. We saw that. We saw that again with Texas Chainsaw, the sequel in 1986.
Oh yes.
Turning into a comedy, more of a horror comedy than it's such a complete 180.
Oh
of what
yeah,
the first one was.
It didn't fit. The first one. I mean, well, thematically it did, but like atmospherically, it did not fit the first one at all. It was a completely different vibe than the first one was.
Yeah, and that was my big thing. Yeah, that was my big thing. Like when I put on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, I'm like, what in the hell did they do to this movie? Because it was way the opposite of what the first one brought. And that's kind of my fault for expecting the second one to kind of like beat the first one. But I bet you on my next rewatch, I will actually so I know going into the movie that I can have fun with it versus just judging it the whole time.
That's what happened with me, man. The first time I was so taken back by it, but then when I watched it a second time, I was like, this is actually a really fun movie, and it's highly entertaining, and I can see what he was trying to do here. And again, it just follows, it's like the Evil Dead kind of thing. Like Evil Dead 2 came out 1987 as well, kind of about that same time frame. So it's also just a pure horror comedy, complete 180 from the first movie. Yeah, I mean, it works. I mean, I think it works. I mean, what else are you going to do with Texas Chainsaw? Like they've tried ever since the second, the remake was good.
The 2003 remake where they fake, they made it like it was a true story, but it wasn't. It's not really a true story. That one actually really worked. It was Michael Bay produced it. Marcus Nispel had directed it with Jessica Biel and all that.
Yeah, it worked. It
worked. It was very good, and it made you believe like, oh, this is a true story. It's actually Ed Gein was the, like you alluded to earlier, Bert. It was like Ed Gein was the inspiration, but they made it like it was a.
Yeah, they just evolved that true story into this whole.
But it makes it creepy though, because you're like, oh damn, Leatherface was real,
Yeah.
It's like this is the only known photo of Thomas Hewitt.
Yeah.
And they call Leatherface, and you're like, fuck, this guy's real, wearing people's fucking skin around town, like, man. Wow.
No, it freaked me out when it came out, dude. I was 12 or whatever. I was like, God dang, man, this is scary as hell. But it did. I mean, it worked. It worked, and that's like I was saying. That's what else are you going to do with Texas Chainsaw other than remake it, which was a successful thing to do.
Yeah, there was no way to expand on what they created in the 70s. Outside of that. Yeah.
So for what it was, I think part 2, because they try to go more serious again with the third one, and then the fourth one with Matthew McConaughey. And those two didn't work at all, man. Like the third one, I haven't seen it, never really cared. The fourth one is not good. It's so in the slightest. So I would rather have what they did with 2 than try a failed serious tone. I mean, it worked.
And as you say, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is supposed to be a complete nightmare, not like a good time. But I did appreciate what they did. But no, did I say nightmare?
You did.
Oh, so do you know what we got to talk about next, right?
I do, man.
We got to talk about probably one of the most iconic horror characters in history.
And I couldn't possibly think of what you're talking about.
Well, why don't you just sleep on it? He might come to you. But
oh, look at this guy, Pun DMC over here.
I'm telling you, I love my puns. One lost up at a time. But we got to talk about Freddy Krueger and Wes Craven's masterpiece of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Because that's like to me one of the best horror movie ideas you can ever come up with is to have a killer in your damn dreams where nobody freaking believes you. Like what's more scarier than that? Like you're afraid to fall asleep.
And also you can kind of see the evolution of like Michael Myers, who doesn't say a fucking word, to Jason. He's got they both have masks. Jason has a bag on his head, doesn't say anything, goes on, and then all of a sudden you just have this guy who has burns on his face, horrible to look at, and is just like the cockiest bastard on planet Earth, murdering these. Yeah. So you can kind of see the evolution there, I think.
Oh yeah, that franchise evolved too, like during the '80s too, like because it was supposed to be a dark tone movie. The second one was dark too, and then the third one, that's where we just start going up with like, okay, let's have fun with Freddy. Let's have him throwing like corny jokes and all there. Welcome to primetime, bitch, and all that. And even though I love Dream Warriors, it's such a fun movie. Even though have gone a big more appreciation and more love towards the second Nightmare on Elm Street movie, Freddy's Revenge.
I'm a big fan of it, man.
Is that the one that has the chick that looks just like Meryl Streep, a young Meryl Streep?
Yeah, I think
yes.
the
second one. I think that's the second one.
I had her name on the top of my head. But
in the movie, she looks so much like Meryl Streep. It's unreal. I actually had
it's it's good, and you can kind of see the way these franchises evolve. Friday, Nightmare, Halloween, to an extent. From the beginning of the 80s to the end, like they all get more cheesy. Obviously, I mean, what are you going to do? They all do that.
Yeah, dude. I was thinking about Kim Myers is the name of the actress. And you guys can go and look her up. But in the movie, if you can picture a young Meryl Streep, they look identical. I mean, it's. I thought it was Meryl Streep for the longest time.
Yeah, and what Nightmare did too, it was actually. Wes Craven came up with the idea because he saw an actual story where somebody did die in their sleep. So
that can happen.
I'm telling you, it's just to me the greatest horror movie concept that I have ever heard of in my entire life, and that's why the first movie is so damn successful. I wish they could have cleaned up the last 5 minutes of the movie because that's the only thing that takes me away from giving it a 5-star.
Yep, for sure. You can see the way those evolve. You see like Halloween 2, even 1981, just the second movie of the Halloween franchise is you're already seeing more gore in that and more gruesome kills. More, there's titties in there at one point. At the hot tub scene there. You see that. But let's talk about some stuff that's not the big three, like just some stuff that came out in the 80s. That really just kind of fit the mold of the 80s more so. I mean,
I'm gonna throw one out there just before you get going. I want to say I think fits the bill, which is a lot of fun. I feel like kind of is quintessential 80s is Fright Night.
Yeah,
I was about to say that.
Fright Night and the Lost Boys.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun about like. There's also this thing about the 80s where it seemed to be really obsessed with like you don't know who you're living next door to, like you don't really know people as well as you think you do or something like that.
Yeah,
that's was a perfect example of like, oh fucking the guy named Jerry that lives next door is really a vampire, and shit like that. So I just want to throw that out there. I thought Friday Night was excellent. The remake is also a lot of fun.
With Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
You get those, and that's a good example too. You get that because I saw this in Fright Night. You get some badass freaking soundtracks to these horror movies in the 80s too.
Yeah, man. Yeah. You know what I miss about the 80s? The synth, man. They were all about the synth in the 80s. And it's so like they also did this. It was a great throwback, and it follows.
Yes.
They did that score. Yeah. And it was a lot of fun, and it follows, and all throughout the 80s, man, they had these great like scores that were predicated on synth. And
because we got
Halloween 2 is a perfect example of that too. It changes the soundtrack immensely from the first one to the second one. It turns into a synth soundtrack. I love it.
Yeah, and John Carpenter is a huge thanks to that because like Halloween 3 had a great soundtrack in my opinion too.
Yep. More of that synth stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, it might have had a great soundtrack, but nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
I like Al Winthrop, but you get not only do you have the synth in a lot of these movies, you get some badass rock soundtracks. You got Dream Warriors, you got Alice Cooper coming in, and Jason Lives.
Yes, and we got that one song from Jason Takes Manhattan. One of the few highlights of that movie was that awesome opening song.
Oh yeah, that was good. You get
man, and honestly, the
Lost Boys,
1980, but the fucking and it's a little bit different. The Shining is one of the greatest scores of all time.
Yeah, when we're talking scores,
it wasn't synth based, but creepy. I don't think any score has ever sort of dedicated itself to creating an atmosphere more than
The Shining.
The Shining.
Yeah, and that goes right back to Nightmare on Elm Street with its score and soundtrack with so iconic, and it's just so creepy too.
And those first few Friday the 13th movies with the violins and the orchestra there,
1 through 4.
Yeah, those were great. Lost Boys had some badass freaking music in there too, dude. Thou shalt not fall. Whatever. You know what I'm talking about? Freaking Pet Cemetery, I thought had a great score to it, a good creepy score. I mean, it wasn't
the original one did.
Yeah, it's not anything.
There's really nothing good about the. You know what else, dude? Oh my goodness, I can't believe this is on here, and I realize I've been interrupting YouTube for like 5 minutes now, and I'll shut the hell up right after this. But we're talking about Stephen King, and Silver Bullet.
Yeah,
the werewolf one.
In 85, the werewolf in the wheelchair. Great movie, but was it Gary Busey as the uncle is fantastic. What the hell are you talking about? He's always over the top. Also has a synth score. Also Stephen King. Great stuff there. All right, I'll shut up.
No, you're good, man. I'm glad you brought that up too, because one of our good buddies, Matt Fauci, absolutely loves that movie, and I have not seen it, and so he gives me shit all the time for not watching that movie.
Yeah,
it's weird and over the top, man, but it's really.
Oh, but I love the look of the werewolf. Like that's the only thing I can say about that movie is I love the look of the werewolf.
Yeah, are either of you guys Twin Peaks fans?
I haven't seen it.
I love the restaurant. I love the restaurant.
Oh yeah, I love the restaurant too, as well as the titties that it populated. But
again, into the 80s.
The werewolf in there, the actor he's a big character on Twin Peaks. That's all I was pointing out. But you go ahead. I said I was shutting up. I'm shutting up.
No, you're good, dude. But no, I'm glad you brought up werewolves because let's talk about the ultimate werewolf movie of all time that came from the 80s, An American Werewolf in London.
Bingo was his name. Oh,
yeah, we got to talk about that because I saw that famous practical effects scene of the transformation from man to werewolf. Oh my gosh, dude, it was so damn awesome.
Never seen it.
I just don't know. Oh, but dude, you gotta watch it, man, because
I've seen there was a slight remake called An American Werewolf in Paris that came out in the mid to late 90s with Tom Everett Scott. And it scared me whenever I was a kid. I was like 8 or 9 when it came out, and I was like, oh man, I'm terrified to watch this. But I've never gone back to watch the original. Is it good?
Oh, dude, you gotta go back and watch the original. Absolutely.
Is it good shit?
Yeah, dude,
phenomenal effects, dude.
Yeah, and speaking of the effect, that transformation scene, it would actually open the door for the awards for best practical effects was born.
Yeah, I won the first.
At the Academy.
Won the first.
That
Academy
scene
Award.
alone created that particular group of awards, and yeah, big thanks to the horror genre for creating that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Let's talk Child's Play briefly, dude.
Oh man, don't fuck with the Chuck.
Child's Play, fantastic, dude. I mean, I so much fun with this little dude running around. Great time. Another great 80s feel, man. Because you get
I'm sorry, I interrupted you again, Brad. You know what? Y'all just gotta cut me out, dude. I shouldn't even be here. No, go ahead, man. What were you trying to say?
I was just saying, you gotta. The '80s just has so much of this, man. So much of this fun vibe between the introduction of horror comedies and just more horror with a little bit of comedy thrown into it. That's just, I mean, the Child's Play is just a perfect example of that. But I'm sorry, that's all. That wasn't even important to say. But I go ahead and
No.
It's important though, because like they transform, like it's like to keep a kid like safe and secure. What do they always go to? Like if you're a kid,
they're a freaking Chucky doll, dude.
or just a toy, like just their toy, like it's like safe, it's harmless. But what they did that's so damn creative is they transformed the thing that's supposed to keep a kid safe and secure into like an ultimate killing machine, and the kid, yeah, like it's just so.
That's all horror is all about. It, and it's trying to take something that makes you feel safe and using it against you. It's kind of like the rental most recently. It's like now everyone that ever gets an Airbnb again is going to be like, damn, I need to look for cameras in here. That's all. It's like people in Jaws. Oh, I want to go to the ocean and relax, and you get in there, and there's a movie that comes out like, oh fuck, I need to look for sharks.
Yeah, and the freaking Saint Bernard from Cujo. That's a very peaceful dog.
Yeah,
turns into this ferocious little bastard. Yeah, dude, that's a great dude. That's what horror's all about: is creating a scenario where something is safe and turn into like the most darkest thing ever imaginable.
Yeah, and Child's Play,
it does that.
Yeah, and even now you think about the remake and you look what it does. Like Child's Play, a child's toy back in the day. You look at that, it's creepy. And then what does the new one do? Oh well, it's a they take Chucky and make it like an Alexa, an Alexa type thing where you can tell it to do things and it turns against you. So it's really just a play on how you make today's technology work against you.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll tackle that movie in the future on this episode because I got a lot of words to say about that movie.
Which one?
Of the remake. Like, I like the remake, but there are a lot of parts of the remake where it just does not fit the Child's Play mold.
That's what I liked about it. I rather enjoyed it because it was different, and they did their own thing.
It was a remake, true and true. It wasn't just a reboot of the same, same old. Because they've had, let's face it, fucking Chucky's been going on for so long now. You can only do it so many times until it's boring. So
yeah, exactly.
I thought it was kind of
but Chucky by and large did a pretty good job of evolving over time. It went, the first one was pretty scary, and then it starts adding some humor elements in the second and the third one. I mean, obviously it's got humor elements in the first one too, but it starts doing more so. And then you get the Bride of Chucky, and it's pure.
It's almost comedy.
Yeah.
It's more so comedy than it is horror. Yeah. I mean, you still get a couple of kills and stuff in there. You get a little bit of gore, but predominantly it's a comedy.
Yeah, and you can follow these franchises and just kind of see how horror is evolving overall. I mean,
it's like I said, with Child's Play back in the '80s, where Bert alluded to, where it was like, oh, it's taking a doll that you feel, you buy a doll for your child to help them feel safe or whatever, turns against them, and then you see the remake today where it's about AI and things like that, and about that turning against you. Mm-hmm. And so it's very, like you said, it's very, you can see the evolution of how it kind of uses that against you.
Yeah. And the last thing I really want to tackle about the 80s, because the 80s also does share its like fair share of dark tone movies as well, kind of like what the 70s did. I want to point some of those out real quick. The first one is Maniac.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is to me a big time 70s movie that was made in the 80s.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, with the mannequins and all that.
Yeah, like where just without going too much detail like on all that, but yeah, it's just every time like I watch that movie or at least hear the name of it, I just want to go take a shower immediately because that's just how gritty the movie is. And I can't say enough things about like how damn dark that movie is, but it's also very good as well. What else do we have here?
There's a remake of that within the last like maybe 10 or 15
with
years.
Elijah Wood.
Elijah Wood, yeah, and it was really good.
Yeah, I heard it was okay. I heard it was good.
I enjoyed it. It wasn't quite as good. There's also Maniac Cop.
Yep.
Yeah, Maniac Cop. Those three movies.
Fucking Bruce in there, man. That movie's awesome.
And the one I watched recently, if I'm trying to get Brad to freaking watch, but he's having a hard time finding the movie. But The Hitcher.
Yeah, and that's one I've seen before, and it's a great movie, man. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but The Hitcher's the Hitcher did for Hitchhikers the same thing Jaws did for Oceans, man. Like you just don't pick them up anymore.
Nope.
Yeah.
I think we're not talking about the remake. And we're not talking about the remake with Sophia Bush and that other guy I can't think of.
Vigo
right now.
Was Vigo
Sean
Mortensen?
Bean, Mr. Freaking.
It was Sean Bean.
Yeah, Sean Bean. I quite like it.
006, dude. What are you talking about?
Yeah, dude. I remember the first time I saw Hitcher do the remake. I was thinking
he's probably better known as Ned Stark. Yeah.
Well, at the time though, I was thinking, freaking, oh, dude, this is the dude from Bond, man. This is the guy from GoldenEye. Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I quite liked the remake too. But the first one was obviously it's better. By
a country mile.
Yeah, I mean it was yeah, I really liked that one, man.
And another one too, Reanimator. Have y'all heard of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that goes like in a dark tone. Like it does have like some fun into it, but it does like tackle a subject of what if you can bring people back from the dead. And that's always a scary feeling too, because they never come back as like how you remember them. They're like a whole totally different person. So is it actually, and it asks the great question of all, and Pet Sematary did it too. Is it worth bringing them back for them not being the same person as you remember them?
I'll tell you, Bert.
As Judd said, I think you're getting ready to say it.
Oh yeah, sometimes dead is better.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was weird. Great minds.
Mm-hmm.
Great minds. Reanimator was fantastic. The Fly too is another one.
Yes, thank you for bringing up The Fly.
Yeah.
That was almost really original when it came out.
That's actually a remake. You know the 80s The Fly is
was a remake of it.
Yeah, it's a remake.
With Goldblum?
Yeah, with Goldblum. That's a remake because they did the movie before.
Maybe I knew that. I hadn't thought about it in a long time, but I know whenever I was younger, the Goldblum version, I saw it when I was a kid, and it scared the shit out of me, dude. I was like, I don't know why this guy turned into a fly is so like heinous to me, but it
practical effects.
It's terrifying. Yeah, when he's like pulling his fingernails off, and he's like, I think I got caught in there with a fly. Plus Jeff Goldblum is,
great casting choice.
Yeah.
There's another one. There's another one here. I haven't seen it. I think I want to say it had another of the scariest movies on that Bravo show from back in whatever year that was. It's The Changeling from 1980. I haven't seen it, but it's supposed to be a classic of the genre. It's got a 3.60 on Letterboxd. I don't know if either one of you guys heard or even seen it.
There was a movie that came out in like 2008 or 9 called Changeling that Angelina Jolie was in, that Clint Eastwood directed. I've seen that. Not a bad movie, but I haven't heard of this one.
Yeah,
it's got like George C. Scott and all these other people in there.
Yeah, this one came out. The plot, after a tragic event happens, composer John Russell moves to Seattle to try to overcome and build a new and peaceful life in a lonely big house that has been uninhabited for many years. But soon after, the obscure history of such old mansion and his own past begin to haunt him. So it sounds compelling, and I think it's a classic of the genre. But I haven't seen it. I need to see it. It's another one of those I've been trying to find for many years and just haven't had the opportunity to see it yet. But nonetheless, man. I mean, Psycho 2, man.
I was getting ready to say Psycho 2, one of the best, like to me, horror sequels of all time.
Yeah, it did a really good job of following up a freaking classic, man, and doing its own thing and not really being. Yeah, it did a really good job.
There's like 3 more movies I'll just quickly throw out there. I know you all have been listening to us blabber a lot about the 70s and 80s. We just find that just the most enjoyable, kind of like decades of horror is the 70s and 80s. But the last, and plus I would get in trouble if I did not mention these movies too. The first one being The Return of the Living Dead. J-Man loves that movie over at Jason Knight's channel. That it's a very fun zombie movie that you can have a lot of fun with as Tom Matthews. Easily a great time. Another Matt Fauci movie, and he loves this movie too, is My Bloody Valentine.
Hey, I watched that original not too long ago. Holds up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really does. And a great look too. And of course, the 70s had Black Christmas, a Christmas movie. Why not the 80s tackle on a Christmas movie? And instead of going all dark, we decided to go all cute and cuddly with my boy Gizmo and Gremlins.
Gremlins. Yeah, I was going to bring that one up if nobody said it, because that launched several sequels, man. The Gremlins was the first one was fucking awesome. My mom loved that movie, man. When I was a kid, I was like, hey, let's watch The Exorcist or Debbie Does Dallas or what have you, and she was always like, nah, dude, Gremlins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dude, Gremlins. Ghoulies came out too. Little critter movies, Critters too, I think came out. Yeah. It was good. Again, man, there's just so much we could talk about in the 80s. So much freaking stuff we could talk about. But just for the sake of time, like, is there anything else you guys want as far as single movies that we left off that you guys really want to talk or bring up at any point?
I would say just one. 1987, Hellraiser came out, which wasn't my favorite. I think actually the first one was the only one that I've ever seen. But I know that it was popular enough to launch. Obviously they're still making them, and they're thinking about going back and doing another one. So, I wasn't a huge fan of it, but obviously a lot of people were. So Hellraiser, I think, is worth a mention. You guys have anything to say about it?
I liked it okay. I've seen the first two and only the first two. And I thought, I liked the first one more than the second one. I know most people like the second one more, but I just like the story. The first one I thought had a better story. And but I don't know, Bert, have you seen those?
I've only seen the first one, but I have the second one on my watch list, which is on Shudder too. So I've been meaning to try to visit that movie. But Hellraiser, it's just not my cup of tea. Let's just say that. Like, I can see why it's a good movie and people like it, but it's just not my cup of tea.
I agree. Like I said, I think the first one's pretty good, but I don't have any interest to watch all of them just because I just don't. The first one I wouldn't mind to rewatch. I thought it was pretty good, but but what about, this is one we haven't mentioned yet, and that's The Fog. John Carpenter's The Fog.
Yeah, and that's actually what the point I want to bring up is one of my favorite actors from the 80s. One Mr. Tom Atkins. Yeah. Dr. Chalice.
Dr. Chalice, yeah.
Oh man, but yeah, he was in The Fog, and he did his little swing move, and Jamie Lee Curtis, bam, got in bed with him. But no,
have you seen that one, Chris?
Which one is it?
The Fog from 1980.
I've seen the remake. I know. I don't think I have. It's good. Many things that I've seen it before, but then I can't remember it. So I'm going to say no. The Fog is the one where it rolls in like off the beach or whatever, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And John Carpenter has Jamie Lee Curtis, Tom Atkins. It's got Sheriff Brackett from Halloween in there. Lee. No, that's his Halloween name. Lee Brackett. Charles Cyphers. And it's got Annie from Halloween as well.
Yeah, it does have Annie from Halloween.
Yeah, Annie.
Freaking! I got the signature up here, man, up there from your boy. But yeah, she's in there. Yeah. Great flick. Good Carpenter's again with the scores. Another good Carpenter score. The thing we didn't mention with the scores earlier has great music. Simple but great. But yeah, man, I just wanted to bring that one up real quick. And we talked about Christine. I think this was the decade of freaking John Carpenter, though. After he did Halloween.
Yeah, and Stephen King. Yeah, both of them were like, this is their heyday, man.
And they even did John Carpenter did Christine, which is a Stephen King story. So that just kind of sets it up perfectly for you. Christine, you got Prince of Darkness in here. You got obviously you got The Thing, and you got The Fog as well. So yeah, it's the decade of Johnny Boy Carpenter.
Johnny Boy Carpenter, yeah, that's how he's going. That's what he's being recognized as these days.
But yeah, so if you guys had to just put a few words out there to describe the 80s, what would it be?
I'm sorry.
Fun. Just back again, the 70s was just dark and gritty. So if you want to switch it up and not have fun all the time with your horror movies, there is an option for you for the 70s. That again, great era. We had probably more of the better horror movies of all time came from the 70s than the 80s. But when we're talking about rewatchability, we easily hop into the 80s where we just have fun and we could just always put it on and just have a good time with it. So just for me personally, I love the 80s. The 80s is just my genre of horror, especially for slashers. So I love the 80s.
That's a good point. The stuff from the 80s is way more rewatchable than the stuff from the 70s. Very good point. And yeah, I just kind of piggybacking off of that. I think the 80s, the 70s was all about the dark, the slow burns, the atmosphere, the moods, all that stuff that, that's freaking awesome. But then the 80s is freaking badass soundtracks, badass special effects, freaking cheese and comedy. You get the introduction of horror comedies and just trickling in comedy within horror itself. A lot of that. The Burbs. You get a lot of horror comedies at that time. So yeah, that's what it all comes down to in the 80s, man. And then, like Chris said, titties is a part of it.
The other thing is like you see that evolution where it's like, oh yeah, horror comes out. In the 70s, you find a way to build that in there just to make it fun in whatever way that you can. Whether it's adding titties or building the comedy in there, something to break up the tension. And I think someone recognized like, hey, we can make horror, a much more accessible genre if we just make it a little bit more watchable. Let's try to make it more relatable, whatever. And someone figured that out in the 80s, and they went with it. And so I definitely think the 80s have, like you said, Bert, way more rewatchable movies in the 80s. And I think, for me, probably more enjoyable. Not to say that the movies that came out in the 70s aren't great. Just the 80s are a little bit more enjoyable, shall we say.
Right.
So that brings me on to... Sorry, Bert, go ahead. No,
that's okay. No, I was just pretty much going to say, like, everybody has a different taste in everything. Like, that we're going to have horror fans that love the darker tones, so the 70s are there for them. And then there's people like us, Chris and Brad. We love the 80s, and we love the cheesiness. We love the practical effects. So we lean more towards the 80s. Like, there is not a wrong answer. It's just this, what kind of horror fan are you? And that's why we have those options out there. And I appreciate both eras having different options for different fans.
Okay. Yeah,
definitely,
for sure. Yeah. That brings me into just a few questions I want to ask you guys before we wrap this thing up. And you don't have to give me too detailed in your answers. I'm just curious. If you could pick, if you had to go to an island, okay, and each decade says, hey, you can take 5 of our movies with you while you're there forever. Which decade? You don't have to tell me which movies they are, but which movies would you pick 5 movies from? Which decade would you pick 5 movies from?
Just for what, like
for a deserted island, the deserted island technique.
Okay, so deserted island, 5 from each era.
No. Which decade would you pull 5 movies from? If you could pick a decade to pull 5 movies from, which one would you do?
Oh, easily it's got to be the 80s for me. because again of that rewatchability factor.
Yeah, I think if I'm going to, if we're talking about like desert island discs here, I have to go with the '80s. I mean, definitely, there's much more that I could, sit down and watch a million times over while I'm sitting there waiting to be rescued. In the '80s, than in the '70s. And say I feel like I'm getting rescued, so I want to take the '80s just so I can have fun until somebody gets there.
Yeah. I think you're right, just because of rewatchability. Now, okay, so going off of that, which decade do you think provided the scarier movies, 70s or 80s?
70s. I'm going to say 70s right off the bat. I think I shat myself more on those movies, and still to this day, I find myself more terrified watching those than ones from the 80s. I think.
Yeah, easily the 70s are the scarier movies, just because they tackled the scary scenarios first before the 80s had a chance to get their hands on it. And the 70s just nailed it with making us be afraid of the ocean, religion, and Last House on the Left, like Trusting Strangers at the beginning. Easily the 70s.
Okay, yeah, I think the 70s was all about trying to find a way to scare you about shit, and then the 80s was just taking that fear and having fun with it. You know what I mean?
Yep. Okay, so yeah, I agree. 70s for me too. There's several movies in the 70s that used to scare the shit out of me. Halloween being one of them. So I'm going to ask you guys another one. What's your favorite movie from each decade? Favorite horror movie, and which one of those do you like more?
First off, from the 70s, it's obviously Halloween, just a classic of its time. And then the 80s, I go with The Shining, to me, because I loved Jack Torrance, just that character study, of him being normal, just going super psychotic at the end. Just a fun time to watch that. But of the two, I think it's The Shining. That's the better between the two, just for me personally.
Interesting.
I think the 70s, man, it's really tough to pick just one. I'm just kind of glancing through here real quick and see if there was a real easy answer here, but I don't think there is. So I have to say, I think for the 70s, for me, it's probably Jaws. Just because I think it had a bit. I was definitely more afraid watching Halloween, but I think Jaws had a bigger impact on me. I remember going even as a kid, going to the ocean and being like, "Oh fuck, I can't get in there. Fuck it, there's a shark in there," So I think Jaws had a bigger impact on me. But I would say, it'd be a close one. But Jaws, and then also the 80s. Yeah, Bert. I think you're right, man. The Shining. Also, as I alluded to when we were doing our Shining video, I watched it with my grandma when I was a kid, and it was fucking terrifying. Couldn't go back and watch it until I was an adult. So I'll say those two, Jaws and The Shining for me.
And out of those two, which one would you pick?
Out of those two, which would I pick? Oh, fuck me, man. I mean, I gotta go to Shining, just because it's I don't the creepy thing about The Shining is I remember being so young, I didn't understand it. It was horrifying, and then at the same time, I couldn't get a grasp on what I was watching. I go back and watch it as an adult. I saw it, in the 4K rendition a couple years ago before Dr. Sleep, and it's still holds its way. It's still atmospherically, it's terrifying. And even if you get a better understanding of what's going on, it doesn't detract from it. It's still terrifying as all hell. So I'll go with Shining.
Okay,
good choice, Bert. I'm surprised you didn't go with The Burning, dude, from the 80s.
Well, if The Shining wasn't in there, maybe it could have. You also got Friday the 13th Part 4 and all that. See, there's so many great choices from the 80s.
There are.
The Shining.
I'm just looking at impact movies. There's probably. Those aren't necessarily my two favorites. I just go with those two because I think they had the bigger impact. You know what I mean? They left a lasting impression where the other ones didn't.
I agree. I mean, mine. I'll give you guys a guess what mine is. I mean, you can see behind me. I got two posters back there, and it's pretty obvious. I mean,
which one are you going to pick between the two?
So yeah, my two is Halloween and The Shining, obviously. And I know it's not the most exciting answer because we've already been talking about those two. But out of those two, I have to pick Halloween. And they're both of these are my top 10 movies, not horror movies of all time. But I give the slight edge to Halloween just because of how rewatchable it is and just how easy it is to watch. Short, freaking just goes by in a snap, and just so how compelling it is, man. So I give the slight edge to that. I mean, I think The Shining is probably more. I mean, obviously it's got more themes, more symbolism, and more things going on for it. But I do like the simplistic nature of Halloween. So I give it that. And it's one of the only movies I remember as a kid. I watched the Halloween movies, Friday the 13th movies. I watched them religiously all the time, nonstop. I wasn't watching Disney. I was watching these. But the first one always scared the shit out of me as a kid, man, especially once it got to the third act. I always dreaded putting in the first Halloween movie, not because it was bad, because it was scary. I'm like, oh, shit, this is bad news for the Brad, man. And I would watch it, but yeah, it used to scare the hell out of me. And yeah, it's still by far the scariest movie, I think, of the big three. Yeah, it's great. It's up there. I watch it more so than The Shining just because of how easy of a watch it is. So I'm going to go that route.
Okay.
My last question for you guys is, okay, we are here at the end. What is your favorite? Which decade would you go with? Which is the best when you take in all aspects?
Okay. With everything we've talked about, like I love, like, the 70s obviously have the best made films. There is absolutely no question. But just for me, of what I'm looking for and just everything we've talked about, I gotta go with the 80s. Just because, like, I love the Friday the 13th. I love the Nightmare on Elm Street franchises. I love all the corny, cheesy horror movies. That's just my forte. I just go with the 80s, but like just of the era that I picked. But obviously, if we're talking about just movies to make the absolute best movie, it's the 70s.
Okay.
I feel similarly. I think that I have to go with the 80s. I think there's so much about everything that I love about horror, about the sequels and the campiness, the enjoyability of watching it. I love a good straight horror movie where you're just, oh, I'm about to shit my pants, I'm on the edge of my seat the entire time. But when I really approached it, younger, I thought that, oh well, it's about like, oh, how much fun can I have watching horror, and the 80s kind of did that for me. So I think I have to go with the 80s. It's
okay. Oh man.
Yeah.
I still
got to be, man.
I love the 80s, man. I do. And if you would have asked me a few years ago, I would have gone with the 80s easy, hands down. But I have just so much lately, I've grown such an appreciation for these slow burn movies. And just, I think if I take the averages of, the movies from the 70s versus the movies from the 80s, I think the higher average would be the 70s, especially if I take my top 10.
If you're talking about the general quality of film, I would say the 70s are there. I'm just talking about like the overall.
The 80s are definitely more fun. And I'm not saying anything negative here about the 80s. The 80s are definitely more fun. But I just the 70s did so much for horror, man. Like, it introduced so many things. It introduced the slasher. It introduced freaking psychological. It introduced possession. The 80s wouldn't have been there if it weren't for the 70s. So I still have to go with the 70s, man, just because of how terrifying those movies are and still are today and what they've done. Those movies are just hard to find. Like, the 80s, there's so many movies, and that's great, but a lot of them are very similar. And you can still find movies.
True, yes.
Yeah, but the 70s, those movies are hard to find. They're so unique, they're so fresh, and they're so they don't make movies like that anymore.
And probably like what we were talking about, like at the beginning of the episode, I feel like the films that came out in the 70s, those horror movies, like, probably had a bigger impact.
Yes,
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, whenever an audience in the 70s watching that, probably had a bigger impact than than the people that in the 80s that were watching those movies. So
yeah, for sure. And I love the 80s, but it's just not. It's just not. It's not as revolutionary. It's not as. It's not as. It's not as. There's not as much there in the way of story, I guess, is the way to say it. It focused more on, and this is stuff I love about the 80s, but it focused more on the badass soundtracks and the freaking the gore and the effects. All that stuff's fantastic. I love that, but I'm a story person. I'm all about the story, and I like being driven by the writing of a narrative. And I just found that stuff to be better in the 70s personally. But yeah, man, overall you can't go wrong with either of the freaking genres.
Yeah, and just all eras of horror is important too, because each one just brings something very unique to the table. And the 70s, 80s easily have done that, like impacted the horror genre more than any era, in my opinion. So I'm glad we did this episode.
Yeah, me too. It was fun, man. It was good, and man, it created some more ideas for me in the future, for sure, to talk about maybe our top 10 from each decade and whatnot at some point.
And a lot of these ideas can easily transition into the
best TNA from the 80s versus best TNA from the 70s. No, I'm kidding.
The 80s would win that one.
Man, we better get out. Man, we better get out of here before Chris just loses control over that TNA scenario. So, should I take us home?
I'm looking it up right now, dude. My goodness.
Okay, yeah. Let me take it up here, or take us home. So, guys, what did you all think about our video topic of the 70s versus the 80s? Are you a 70s horror fan? Or are you an 80s horror fan? Or hell, are you both? Let us know in that comment section down below. Let's not only get that discussion rolling, but also just out of curiosity, what are your also favorite 70s movies and 80s movies? Once again, in that comment section, let us know.
And if you want to help us find the good reels, you can do so by locating us on Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, Twitter, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Those links are going to be in the description for you to find.
Absolutely, and of course, this episode will be on our podcasting state, or kind of like our station, so be aware of that. And just to quickly throw out there too, we are now officially on Snapchat, so if you want to kind of like see pictures of behind the scenes of what we do for our channel, give us a follow on Snapchat. And we created a brand new Facebook public group of Good Real Hunting. We would appreciate you joining us there too.
Woo!
Woo! That's right. And be sure to like this video, subscribe, and share, because that always helps out our channel. And of course, ring that bell, ding, 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 so you know when the next video is up and running.
And we will see you guys soon.
See you guys.
With the mac and cheese. Woo! Woo! Peace. Yeah, and it was, again, oh shit. Sorry, I had a little phone problem there.
No worries, man. We're playing beers with the bros for nothing.
Where were we?
Sorry.
No, you're good.
There's a ghost in here bringing me a beer.
Oh, well, damn! I wish I had ghosts like that.
It's a possession in this house.
See, this is what I believe we need to have back in today's world.
And that's another one of mine. Woof, 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 woof is a solid addition.
Yeah, keep your dogs away from the thing.